welcome to Hobby Positive. In this first episode, I get to sit down with my very good friend Guy from Midwinter Minis. We're going to be talking about all things hobby related, the importance of hobbies and things to consider if you're looking to get into a new hobby. But first, let's have a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by WarMag. WarMag is the absolute perfect solution if you want to be able to store or carry your minis around safely. If you're into miniature wargaming like me and you have a lot of minis that you need to put or carry somewhere, WarMag is the product for you. With WarMag, you get a magnetic base plate that fits into standard size really useful boxes. Then just simply select the magnets that you need for your miniatures, stick them to the bottom. Hey presto, your models are going to stay in place in safety. WarMag is absolutely brilliant if you want to carry your models around without having them wobble about and you don't want boxes and boxes full of foam. WarMag helps to keep your miniatures dust-free on the shelf. So if you're interested in picking up WarMag, head over to themagnetshop.co.uk and then look for the drop-down for WarMag. Now, on with the show. Today, I am joined by Guy from Midwinter Minis. Hello,
With that
Guy.
introduction, I thought you were going to talk about someone much more interesting.
Guy, for everyone who doesn't know, please introduce yourself.
I've been an avid hobbyist my since my late childhood. I can remember I kind of got into various hobbies, and I'm now I suppose a professional hobbyist in that I have a YouTube channel where I document my sort of hobbying journey and share it with anyone who cares to watch. The channel is called Midwinter Minis, and I don't know you because of that, do I, Anne? Because I met you before that happened, really.
We did. And that's very much hobby related, I think. And that's something I really want to kind of get into, and
Good.
some of the positives around hobbies.
Yes.
So I guess, what is a hobby? Because I've got my own interpretation, Guy. What is your interpretation of what is a hobby? Let's get that out of the way first.
It's a difficult one because in my mind it's such like an overarching thing. You could be really morbid and just be like, a hobby is just a pastime to while away your hours before your inevitable death. But
Something to just...
that's not very hobby positive, is it?
Not to think about death.
I think a hobby is basically a thing that people do for themselves. It's like the purest form of just doing an activity for your own enjoyment. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And I was thinking about this myself around kind of what makes a hobby. What is the difference between a hobby and, say, just something like a function for living, right?
Yeah.
So cooking, I get it, right? Cooking can be a hobby. Of course it can. Is there a distinct difference between cooking because you need to prepare food in order to actually continue living, right? Where do you think that is? Where's that line drawn, and does there need to be a line?
Well, I think, yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's such a thing as there's a difference between hobbies and pastimes, isn't there? And, sort of necessities. I wouldn't really say necessities are ever hobbies. But you can create hobbies through necessities, I suppose, like you mentioned, cooking. But like a pastime, there are people who might crack out a jigsaw puzzle or, spend a few hours doom scrolling. Those are pastimes.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't say they're necessarily, unless you're kind of a jigsaw puzzle collector or do you know what I mean? I
do. And that's sort of, there's elements there that I recognize in terms of my definition, and I guess how I engage with hobbies, because I remember kind of having any big hobbies. It's always one of those things I used to think about and go, oh, okay, well, someone who is an angler and can look forward to, I'm going to save for this piece of fishing equipment, right? And this carbon fiber rod, and you're going to upgrade things. And it's like, I've got some fancy waders now. And it's something that you can sort of, if your spouse, partner, family member says, right, what do you want for Christmas? It's like, oh, well, have had my eye on.
Yeah, it's the easy choice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I remember pre-hobby, I guess I used to think that my pastimes were enough within kind of life enrichment, that healthy platter that you create of everything in your life. So whether that is kind of going to work, whether it is spending time with loved ones, whether it is exercising, you've got to have that kind of healthy platter. And for me, like movies, video games,
Sure.
they were okay, but they weren't really cutting it. I felt like I was devoid of much of that kind of enrichment that I think I was looking for as a hobby.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like I feel like we're beating about the bush in not just saying that Warhammer is our hobby, right? or at least tabletop gaming.
Tabletop
Because
gaming.
I feel like the other hobbies that you and I share, we are both film nerds, in to some degree. We're both video game nerds to a large degree. That's like the kind of biggest talking point. That I suppose it's the biggest thing we have in common apart from tabletop gaming, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like similarities between the things we do. What was I saying?
Hobbies, film.
Yes,
games.
there's a difference. There's a difference between tabletop hobbying, like wargaming, painting, stuff like that, and film, games and things, because I think they're like tabletop hobbying is far more all-encompassing in that you can enjoy different aspects of different things within the same hobby. Do you know what I mean? Like you could read a book, you could read a thematic Warhammer-ish book, or you could do some painting, or you could like buff up on some rules and play a game. Do you know what I mean? There's so many things you can do. And of course you can like do your research into films, and you can like go down rabbit holes of different directors and like their techniques that they used and stuff. But yeah, I feel like especially for more artistically creative people, I suppose, tabletop wargaming is it's a fun old hobby to get into.
No, I agree. And I think about movies, and I think games to some extent, although they are interactive by their very nature, I still find them quite passive, or that they're not as interactive and engaging as things like miniature war games, things like, board games, tabletop games, Magic the Gathering even, which, I'm a late bloomer there, but just trying to kind of, I find it way more engaging. And socially, I find kind of movies and games not so socially kind of, they don't give me, scratch that itch that I need socially. Whereas I find the other things, you're physically face to face with an individual, right?
Do you think that's just because when, like watching films isn't really that much of a social thing? Yeah. Because if you're watching a film and you're talking, people are like, shut up.
Exactly.
Shut up.
The questions that keep
ruining it. Yeah.
I know, right? It's like you put on something like Inception or Interstellar to someone who hasn't seen it, or any Christopher Nolan film in the past.
Yeah.
It's like a 3-hour film that lasts 6 hours. It's an all-day experience, pausing it constantly.
I think I like remember watching films before the internet had all the answers, essentially. Talking about like, I mean, it might to a lot of people they'll be like, yeah, of course that's the case, but to some younger listeners they might be like, what, was there ever a time, say for example like in the early 2000s, you'd maybe watch a film and there wasn't the wealth of information about any particular film online at that time. So I think I remember the first time I watched Akira, because that one passed me by when I was, in the sort of mid-90s when it came out. Was it? No, it was late 80s, wasn't it? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Late 80s, but age restriction. Let's just kind of bear that in mind.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah. No one's going to let a 5-year-old watch that. The first time I watched it in like 2002, 2003 or something, I was like, what the hell was that? I was like, went on the internet to try and figure out what I actually just watched. And I just couldn't find any answers. But now, there's like about 1 million 3-hour-long video essays on,
Yeah.
you know,
And that's the immediacy of information that we have at our disposal right now. And I think that's a good thing, especially when it comes to some of these hobbies. So if I go back to Warhammer, I was into Warhammer as a teen, as you were, kind of, young teen, pre-teen, because it was easy. It's pocket money. A few friends played it, and I think that kind of got me into it. And I was, perhaps I saw White Dwarf in a newsagent. It made me kind of, Warhammer curious, right?
Yes.
And seeing the big kind of Games Workshop store with the bright yellow and red kind of logos everywhere, and it just seemed to be buzzing when you used to walk past it. And just the fact that there was so many options as well. But actually trying to find out how to play a game, back then you had the rule book.
Very tricky.
And then it was, okay, if no one knows, and bear in mind pre-teen, you're trying to read this book, and I was not a very good reader. And probably, when it comes
dense.
to reading. Yeah, exactly. And you got 3 books.
The early rule books were much more dense than the current rule books.
Rogue Trader?
Well, and second edition.
Second edition, yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult. It is a difficult game to learn. And it's
this is Warhammer 40k we're talking about here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a slightly different experience getting into the hobby than you, because you actually had Warhammer stores. my gateway place was this tiny shop called the Little Shop.
Was it big? Was it just kind of plain? Was there?
It was so tiny. No, it's the tiny shop that sold tiny things. That was the vibe. And
how much smaller could you get than Warhammer? Was it only Epic that they sold?
Yeah, that was the only place in Jersey that you could get Warhammer. And it's run by this lovely little old lady. Well, she wasn't old then, but she is old now. And she was very encouraging of nerdy endeavors. Yeah, it was lovely. It was crazy. But it was just so vibrant, and everything was so cool looking. And it was just, it felt like a cooler thing to do. And because I was quite an arty child as well, getting into the painting aspect was real good. That's satisfying.
Absolutely.
And it felt less, I don't know, because you sort of make the transition, or I made the transition at least, from just sort of, doing like drawings and kind of paintings on paper. And you're like, well, this is fun and everything, but, I could paint this cool space soldier with a big gun. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or this vampire super warrior.
Yeah, the whole fantasy aspect of it. And I know you go in there with pocket money, you leave with something new and different. I certainly was. You go in there with, 3 English pounds, and then you'd leave with a blister pack. But it wouldn't be. I was never very good at actually collecting a whole army, because I don't know, maybe I wasn't that interested in playing the game at the time, and I just wanted the cool models. And it's like, oh, this is a sci-fi soldier on a horse. Brilliant.
I feel like I feel like that that's, it's not really the same experience now, is it? You can't go into a Warhammer shop with like a $5 and get something cool. They used to be able to. I remember going in with like change, like £2 or £3, and you're like, you get a paint, or you could get a little blister pack with a dude in it. But now it's a bit more of an investment.
It is.
We're wildly going off the topic of hobby positive.
But
we're not. This is basically turning into 2 old people talking about how things were better in the past.
But it's the hobby. It's a hobby. And I think kind of, gaining a hobby and having something to focus energy onto, I certainly find really, really enriching. And that's kind of a big part of my life now. And to me, I've lived with mental health challenges, as I'm sure a lot of people have. And this is kind of one constant for me that has really helped me through those times to really focus a lot of energy. And I think that's the power of what hobbies can give you.
Yeah, 100%.
But as an adult, it's probably easier to come into these hobbies. Now, we mentioned the cost. That can be prohibitive. So, let's look at some of the benefits of hobbying. So for me, just being able to meet people and friends, and I found a hobby, I get excited about it. When I'm at work, I can think about this stuff, and my mind wanders if I'm traveling to work. And I find that quite quite wonderful, quite happy part of my life. Do you sometimes get those? It's different, you do it for a job, but what are the benefits that you receive from actually having hobbies in your life?
I think it's I think the main thing, having been with romantic partners who didn't have any hobbies, essentially, and knowing lots of friends who don't have any hobbies, in the traditional sense. And, they get bored. They just get bored all the time. And they kind of, run out of things to do. And then they're sort of wistful and, kind of almost angry because they don't have anything to do. And it's like, I don't think I've ever felt that in my life. I just I always feel like I have, if I'm around my stuff, I can start, I can like do some painting, or I can kind of like start planning out some schemes, or like do a little, like build an army list. Or if I'm, out and about, I can, read some lore. I can listen to an audiobook or something. There's just so many things you can do within this hobby, particularly. I find that I can't remember the last time I felt bored. Do you know what I mean? I think that's like a huge, I think that's not only good for, you personally and your like happiness, but it's got to have like mental health benefits, right? That feeling of, I don't know, sort of people just like twiddling their thumbs, like, oh, what shall I do? I don't know. It's like, well, that's sort of like an aimless, I feel like that's kind of like quite a sad, aimless way to go about yourself, considering how like short life is and how precious life is. I feel like having that time where you're like just wanting to kill the time and find like literally anything to do because you're bored is like, no. Like, invest it in something, and that you can kind of like show, and you have something to show for it. And I think that's what you were saying about video games as well. Or we've had this conversation before, is that both of us, we've invested multiple tens of thousands of hours into games, right? Yeah. Like realistically, a couple of years of our lives, probably, of waking years on playing games. Right?
Well, when you put it like that, I'm not quite. Yeah.
It is.
What have I done with my life?
Yeah. But that's the thing. Like, what can you do? You'd be like, oh, look at my gamer tag score, or oh, look at my Steam achievements. Like, who cares? Who cares? You can't show that to anyone. You know it in your brain. I've got like a little stupid spreadsheet of games I've finished, and it's like, it's just for my personal.
Are you still keeping that up?
Yeah. I don't think I've finished. I don't think I've finished a game in the last year. Actually, I've sort of broken a streak. I just keep playing games that I like now. Yeah,
well, this is it.
I've tried to play
FTL.
I've tried to play a few, right? And BattleTech. The PC version of BattleTech. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the big three that I just keep going back to.
But I just don't find it's as enriching. I think the social aspect as well, because I mean, if I go and play games online, yes, you can socialize with people, you can try and find some friends, but at that point, pre kind of getting back into Warhammer as a hobby, it was very difficult for adults to meet other adults to have friends with as you get older.
I see where you're going with this, Ant. I see where you're going with this.
You become an adult, right, though? And it gets very difficult to make those social connections. I don't know about you, but all of my school friends kind of drifted apart from them. We'd all gone in different directions and done different things, and, I got married and had children and all that kind of thing. And it just kind of took all my sort of individuality away. And going online to random lobbies of, people that are going to, potentially not be fun to play with, or completely just get wiped off the map to begin with. That's not fun. And I know you don't have to win games to be fun, but
yes, you do.
At all
replay
costs.
games very differently.
Yes, that's why whenever I pick board games to play, I like co-op games rather than competitive games.
I like destroying everyone and reveling in my victory.
There's one way to make sure that you don't, is we're all on the same team, Guy. We want the same thing. We dream the same dreams. But
I know.
but yeah, I was just computer games, video games just don't give that to me until just because drifting away from Warhammer because hey look, romance and kind of sex and beer and all this kind of stuff that you go through as a teenager and then getting into adult life.
Sail as old as time,
isn't it? Though it really is.
Everyone,
it's just it's like kind of throwing Warhammer in the basket. I don't want to play with you anymore.
Yeah,
but getting into an adult and then finding it again, because I was going through the Airfix kits, right? And it's something like Lego has this as well, where you have these instructions. IKEA flat pack furniture too. It's quite satisfying for me. You have the instructions, you follow it step by step, you get all the pieces out, and then you start off with a box of bits, and then suddenly you build something. And it's pretty cool. I like that. And it's quite meditative, and I don't really have to think about anything else that's going on in life. But like Airfix kits, you do them, paint them, sit on a shelf. What do you do with them? Warhammer. I remember Warhammer. And, there's a little kind of shop near me that sold Warhammer. So I thought, hey, look, why don't I just give it a go again? And then it was really lovely just to sit there doing it, and you had something to show for it, like you were saying, that you can play a game with.
Yes. Also, I think another reason why it's great is because there's a lot of the aspects of sort of tabletop modeling and painting and stuff like that you can do kind of passively while doing something else.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like trimming your models and putting them together while watching a film, or or just if there's something else going on, you can do it in the background. You can do it in bed. That's like a classic.
Is it?
It's isn't it?
I've never done. Could you imagine? Like, I don't know.
Have you never Warhammered in bed, my friend?
When you clip in the bits off the sprue and they ping off, and it's like, I'm never going to find that again. I'm going to tread on that at some point in the night.
You thought toast crumbs or crisps in the bed was annoying. Wait until sprue shavings.
Oh my goodness.
Because they don't break down.
No,
they don't get soft.
They're here forever. Continue to have them until long after we're gone. But
yes.
And I think
you're welcome, grandkids.
Thank you. And I think that's the thing, right? Having an army, it's satisfying. You have a thing, you can use it to play games. If you're interested, you can actually get into the lore side of things as well.
I feel like people would be sorry for interrupting you there. I feel like people would like to know how we met Ant, because as I said, it was before the channel, it was before all that stuff. Do you want me to start and you can chime in?
I mean, give us two different perspectives of it.
Yeah, sure. So I just moved down to Colchester from Edinburgh, where I'd lived for 14 years. And I knew nobody in Colchester. I moved with my ex because she started working in Colchester. So I knew nobody, and I sort of left my entire social group behind. And I was like really short on money at the time as well. And I had very limited budget to do anything fun. And I was like, you know what? I sort of did nothing for about half a year. Nothing social. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I might need a friend. So I looked up sort of local gaming clubs, and I found 40K in Colchester, which, viewers of the channel will recognize from the repainting the big Space Marine stuff. And I was like, well, they've got a Facebook page. So I joined that, and I was like, right, is anybody interested? Well, that was when 8th edition had just come out, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it was big and popular, and it was just like, it was everywhere. It got kind of, in the mainstream news, it was being talked about, and suddenly there was a bit of a bounce back, and I don't know if it was becoming cool again, but certainly it was getting a lot of kind of media attention.
Yeah. So I was like, posted, I was like, does anybody want to play a game to learn 8th edition? played in the past, have played 7th edition, would like to, you know, buff up for 8th. And a couple of people replied, and we all met at 40k, had a game together. And it was a 4-way game, wasn't it? We were like four-way, 500 points each, something like that. And I brought, you know, what did I bring? My Gorkanaut and some orcs. Yeah. And you brought your Ultramarines.
Correct. Yeah.
And I was like, straight off the bat, showing my color blindness, right? Because you got your stuff out, and I was like, "Wow, you've got purple things too." you're like, they're Ultramarines. They are blue. I was like, oh. Yes. So that was how we first met, right? And we were playing our game, and we just, well, I think we like seemed to get on pretty well, didn't we? We had like a similar sense of humor.
Yeah.
And then we like broke off and played our own little game by ourselves. And then the romance blossomed from there. And I invited you around to mine to play Warhammer and Necromunda, and
yeah, it just kind of kicked off from there. And I think that is, you find someone that you vibe with, right? And the first person that you're going to play a game with, you may not vibe with, and that's cool. You might not go there to make friends. You might go there and you might enjoy socializing with lots of different people, you know, from one person to another, and you have that varied kind of mindset. But, you know, either way, I think human beings, for the soul, we do need some kind of social interaction. And I think hobbies can give that to you, and especially the hobby that we're into, Warhammer, any kind of tabletop gaming hobby can get you out there.
I think people would like to hear your side of that story, please, Ant.
Yeah, and it was, I hadn't played Warhammer as a child, as a young pre-teen. I never really got into playing it too much because none of my friends were into playing it. And it could have been because of the rulebook. We didn't really have anyone, like an adult, to talk us through and go, oh, okay, you know what, this is how the game works. But I certainly like the models. I like the, you know, you look through White Dwarf and you kind of understand some of the kind of wackiness of some of those models, but I never played. So coming into it, I think for me, gathering a 500-point army that is enough to actually play a game with, just building that bit by bit, getting kind of second-hand models, which you could whenever a new edition comes out, and it was 8th edition at that time. Suddenly the kind of the second-hand kind of market just gets flooded as people kind of either, you know, go halves on boxes or buy a box. They're not interested in one faction, but they are in the other, and you can pick them up a little bit cheaper than retail. And so getting in and painting them was one thing, but then I just thought, it'd be good to play them. And I think this is where we were talking about kind of what's available now and the amount of information at your fingertips. Just battle reports. I think they do an amazing job on YouTube of kind of stepping you through, well, how does this game work? Because for me, I was coming at it thinking, this is impenetrable. It's too complicated. I can't really get into this. And again, you need friends, you need people to play with, which is sometimes can be a bit of a barrier to some of these games. You know, there is an investment, either in time or money, and that might not be, you know, people might not be able to do that. But then after you get over that investment, there is also the aspect of trying to meet like-minded people that you can play games with that aren't like, you know, getting into a multiplayer game, like computer game, and the lobby is full of just people that just want to absolutely kill you and are going to completely berate you if you're not good enough. Find people like that in real life that you can play games with that aren't like that, really. You stay away from them, get to people that really do you connect with. I think that's the joy of it. And I remember coming away from that time playing Warhammer, I was just completely buzzing on the drive home.
It's good, right?
It was just a nice feeling. Like, I found someone, I've connected with them. A bit daunting to begin with in meeting somebody new. You know, he's asked me to go round to his house. Do I need to turn the tracker on my phone?
That's right, baby. Although I have to say, Ant, I will never, ever, ever forgive you for one thing that you did. Unfortunately, it's not hobby related. It's that, was it like after the first time you'd been over and we'd had like cool Necromunda times? And then I was like, all right, you're gonna come over again. I'll like cook lunch and we're gonna do another thing. And you were like, I've just decided I'm vegetarian. I was like, finally, I found a friend I can make like big hunks of meat for.
Yeah.
Because yeah, my previous partners were like no big meaty eaters. And I was like, finally, I've got like a bud I can cook for. And you're like, no meat.
There's probably a good 6 months or so where I probably was still eating meat. It was
just long enough to get me excited.
Yeah, just like, oh, look, yeah, what do you want? Bacon? Yeah, let's have some bacon. But yeah, no, vegetarian. Sorry. But it's okay because the gaming group now that we have is,
it's a good mix, isn't
mainly meaty.
Yeah. Yes. Well, it's just me and Steve is meaty. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes Hattie's a bit meaty.
She just pretends. She pretends she's not. She's like, no meat, and then she's like, apart from all of that bacon, apart from all of the chicken. Yeah. They don't count.
So there's lots of hobbies out there, though, right? If we're talking about this kind of sphere of, you've got wargaming, you've got tabletop gaming, board games are having this massive resurgence now, I think, because people have sort of realised the social connection aspect of it.
Yeah, it's great.
And I think this is kind of the link that ties all of them together is something that you can think about and get excited about when you're not working or doing other kind of life-sustaining kind of pieces of, time sinks.
Yes.
You can iteratively kind of get more and more into the hobby, whether that is, hey, look, I'm going to buy these cool magic cards. Hey, look, I'm going to buy this expansion to a board game. Hey, look, I'm going to buy these new models or new paints or whatever it might be.
Iteratively. I was like, can we swear on this podcast? I didn't realize you were going to be breaking out the thesaurus.
Yes, exactly. Iteratively, bit by bit, you're building on it because you start out small, right? Very few of us can actually sit there and go, yeah, I'm going to buy a Warhammer army. I'm going to spend £1,500 or something on a Warhammer army and someone to paint it up for me. And it's going to be great. You have to start small, right? You don't know if you're going to like it to begin with.
Well, that's what I think. Honestly, I feel like the way we sort of got into it together was the best way to do it, right? Because that 500 point, and you just kind of escalate, don't you? You're like 500 points and you play a little game and you're like, well, that was cool. I got annihilated, but like the things that worked kind of were these things. And you're like, okay, maybe I'll get some more of those. Or maybe like the thing I didn't have was anything like really tough. So you might look for something that's really tough. And like next time, look, I've got a tank. You know what I mean? And you just kind of like build your little relationship with the hobby that way, rather than just kind of going, right, I'm going to get into playing Warhammer and I'm going to buy a 2,000 point army and this is my army, and you do all the research. And then in 3 months, the rules change and you're like, I'm not having fun anymore.
You acclimatize to it, right? It's like kind of, yes, you can jump into the boiling frog thing, right? You could jump into, a really cold vat of water and you get that shock, whereas, you raise the temperature slowly, but then you have a get out. If you don't do it iteratively, you don't really have that get out. If you suddenly, uncover a stone or open a little box of a particular aspect of that hobby and then realize, well, it's not for me, then you haven't really had such a large investment in time.
No. Yes.
And funds.
Yeah, because there is, and I think all hobbies go in waves of interest, right? I don't think anybody is like 100% maxed out on their enjoyment of every hobby all the time. Do you know what I mean? And I think like a very easy way to get burned out with like tabletop or like Warhammer style hobbying is by going too deep, too hard. Do you know what I mean? Or like too deep, too fast. Trying to make that sound a bit less sexy. You know what I mean? If you like jump in at the deep end, everything first, and you're like, I've got all my dice, I've got all the books, I've got all the things, I've got all the stuff. It's a big load to deal with. It's like still on the sexy things. If you you know what I mean.
We're going into explicit content. I can see it.
Look, We were all thinking it. No, but honestly, if you, I just think if you get into it in like little dribs and drabs, and kind of deal with stuff at the same time, and especially with the painting, if you get so much at the start, and then you're like, well, I've run out of painting mojo, and then you know you're just looking at these hundreds of models that you haven't painted, and you feel like a failure. But I say this from experience. But I also say this from experience of someone who's painted thousands of miniatures now, you know. So yeah, I would recommend definitely, you know, just starting off little bits and bobs and building up.
Yeah. And how do you choose the right one? So, you know, of all of them out there, there's so many different, you know, let's not talk about kind of if you just talk about miniature war games, for example, there's a lot of different ones. I mean, obviously Warhammer is the biggest because it's been there for the longest, and it's got a massive player base. There's lots of money behind it and everything. But there are lots of smaller miniature games out there that are probably less cost prohibitive, a bit easier to get into.
Sure.
How do you find the one that's right for you? Are there any considerations you think need to be made first?
I mean, first of all, it's going to be visual, right? No matter how good the game is, if the models look like hot garbage, you're going to be like, nah, I'm not going to. Well, I suppose that's, from my point of view, quite aesthetically driven, you know. I love, but then again, there's the aspect of how much of a time investment, I suppose, learning how to play the game is a big one. And also, are there any players for the game? And I think that's actually one of the reasons why, despite me, I think I probably like the aesthetics of BattleTech more than Warhammer. I feel like I'm more drawn to big stompy robots smashing the balls off each other, you know what I mean? But as much as I love the visual aspect of it, there's just, I don't know anybody who plays BattleTech or who has played BattleTech. It's never been like within my community, and the rules seem quite dense. So that, I think those are like two prohibitive things. If like everyone around me played BattleTech and the rules seemed, you know, maybe a bit less dense. I know there's a more streamlined version now, but I'm talking about when I got into the hobby, because they're about the same age, aren't they? Warhammer and BattleTech.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just feel like those two sort of like big factors put me off from sort of getting into it.
Yeah. But you make an interesting point around one of the considerations of people around you to play that game. And yeah, some of these rule sets are very crunchy. They're quite deep. They're quite complicated. Which, you know, on the one hand may put newcomers off, but on the other hand, you know, if you're into it, then there's going to be a lot of depth that you can actually get into and start learning, and suddenly becomes more strategic, and you know there becomes a more deeper well of you to actually plumb. But I find how complicated they are, if you've got friends to play it with, that will kind of, you'll learn together, and you kind of you play whilst learning. That, for me, certainly is a very important aspect of getting into that game.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose, though, things like Necromunda are a bit of a exception, because the rule set for that is crunchy. It's almost as crunchy as like second edition Warhammer was. But the fact that you're only playing it with like a handful of models makes it a bit more, it feels a bit more accessible. Do you know what I mean? Because you're like, right, I have to learn these rules, but really it's just like these guys versus these guys. It's not, you know, I don't have to know the rules for vehicles. I don't have to know the rules for all of these things. It's just, you know, some dude running along a gantry, gets shot, falls off. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, that could be the game over. You know what I mean? That's a bit more kind of like explosive and impactful, I suppose. And
that's the appeal.
That's the appeal. I love stuff like that.
If you've grown up on kind of sci-fi movies, then something like Necromunda, Space Hulk, Warhammer 40,000, even the latest versions of Kill Team, you know, that's going to really appeal, some of those aspects, because, you know, Necromunda, that visualized element of that, just kind of go to, you know, some films like, you know, the kind of Blade Runners of this world. You know, there's this kind of future technology, and there's these kind of people running around a highly dense city, and you can kind of, it becomes more relatable, I guess, if that's kind of how you've grown, I suppose, with sci-fi, for example.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I agree. Wholeheartedly agree.
So there's some considerations there, but and the appeal and the rule of cool, the crunchiness of the rules, the people to play it with. I suppose cost is a thing as well, right? You can't ignore cost when you're thinking around a hobby and you're picking something. You've got to be that balance of it, right?
Sure. I mean, I know everyone complains about things like Warhammer being expensive, but there are ways of playing it for almost no money. Do you know what I mean? You know, sure, if you want like the current models and everything new and to be playing the like current version of the game with all of the rules, cool, that will cost you some money. But you know, there's literally people with with bookshelves full of the old books of a rule set of a game which is incredibly similar to the current rule set, which they will happily give you.
Some of the rules are free. Like, you know, some of the basic rules they're now offering for free, for example. And if you're with a game group that doesn't mind playing with third-party models, for example, some of those can be a lot cheaper.
I've actually just I know this is maybe not even relevant to what we were talking about, but I've come to the realization actually that I just don't care about playing with official models. I am never ever going to play in a tournament.
That's it.
Ever.
Yeah.
And I just don't care. Like I'm from now on, I'm just going to mix and match everything and have fun and like customize stuff and, you know, get alternative things from alternative sellers and 3D print stuff. It's just it feels like almost feels like a new dawn in the hobby at the moment. With the sort of accessibility and the quality of what you can get, whether that's third party stuff or 3D printed stuff. I think in a lot of cases it doesn't just rival, you know, the official things, it kind of exceeds it in some ways. So I'm excited for that.
And I like that too. And I was thinking about that the other day, actually, around what stops me from just fielding an army completely made up of third-party miniatures, because I'm not really going to be a tournament player. And if I am, I'm going to have to change all my models anyway, because they are not magnetized, and they have, when there's a choice of weapon, I've put one weapon on it because I think it looks cooler.
Got the wrong base sizes on your termagates.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of those things, you know, and... so for me, what stops me? Nothing really.
Nothing's... I remember like the biggest heart sink I've ever had in the hobby was, I think it was a few months after I finished painting my entire orc army. So that's like 7,000 points worth of orcs. And I was like, yes, here we go. And I've got, you know, about 200 infantry models that are all on 25mm bases. And then I saw, you know, that whatever it was, like the new... was it the Kill Team box that came out that had some Orc Boys in it? And I was like, why are they on 32mm bases? And then they sort of soft rolled out that was the new size. Like, no, I'm not rebasing them.
No, exactly.
I'm not rebasing them yet.
And unless you're not doing tournament, nobody will care all that much around what you're playing unless they are completely hardcore tournament, which is cool. That's fine. But still, you know, if you're going in there just to have fun, then just go with what you've got. And you're right.
The way you said that's fine made it sound very much not fine.
No, it is. It's totally fine. I mean, I've had games with people that were practicing for tournaments, and as a newbie, you know, 3 or 4 games in, that wasn't probably the right thing to do. No. Because it was tough, really tough. And it reminded me of those kind of, you know, online video game lobbies, if you like.
Yeah, getting absolutely hammered.
Yeah, exactly. Which, you know, that's not particularly fun for me, but I think that's trial and error. You know, you're not going to find your groove straight off the bat. You're going to have this kind of that's not a great experience, but just keep going with it. If you really truly do see the appeal of the hobby, if you do enjoy these aspects of it, then break through and keep going until you can find this group that you can play with that are like you and they want the same thing out of the game.
Yes, exactly. I feel, are we like preaching to the choir though? Because I feel like most people who are going to be listening to this are already kind of agreeing with you or agreeing with the points that we make. Who's going to be listening to this going, yeah, I hate hobbies, waste of time?
I think it's more kind of, I didn't want it just to be aimed at people that are in the hobby now.
Gotcha.
I wanted it to be quite wide and expansive.
Sure. But maybe a validating experience as well, you know, hearing your thoughts.
Exactly. And I just wanted to kind of prime it to say, okay, this is all hobbies, it's hobby positive, this is how we're going to do it going forward, and we're going to be covering some of these topics that we're touching on now in more detail.
Yes,
in a separate show.
Yeah, I mean, we are being quite positive about our experiences, but you know, within the wider community, there's quite a lot of negativity around, isn't there? And I think it's nice to have, you know, somebody like you, so erudite and eloquent, with a beautiful voice and a face.
No, I don't have a face because I don't have my camera plugged in. It's my work.
Anthony.
It's normally in my work PC, but my work PC.
Are you using your work PC for non-work?
No,
topics?
I can't. I really can't. But
really
that's where my camera's normally plugged into.
I'm going to tell your boss. I'm going to write a letter.
Even if you tried, you wouldn't be able to. It's impossible, honestly.
Anthony works for MI6.
And these things may or may not make their way through into the podcast.
There may or may not be an assassin outside my door right now.
Yes. There was one other aspect I was going to talk about, and that is, so you've got this hobby, and let's just say you absolutely love the pants off of it. It is totally up your street. You think about it every single waking hour of the day. You have dreams about it.
What kind of dreams?
You expectant dreams of, you know, building an army or getting a new paint scheme, or you are kind of excited about some new models that are coming out or some new rule changes, whatever it might be.
Okay.
How do you get the right balance though? Because life is still there to be lived.
Sure.
And you may have relationships that you still want to maintain, which suddenly if you're 100% diving straight in, your head's in this hobby all of the time, that might be difficult to maintain. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, probably not the right person to ask, because I'm now doing this as a job, jobby. So I quite often, if I wasn't doing this in the day, like during work hours, I probably would at the moment at least struggle to find a lot of time for it, especially on, the days when I have the kids, because chasing after 2-3-year-olds is a tricky business. And at the end of the day, I'm usually quite tired.
Happens as an adult.
Not against going to bed at like 9:30 at the moment when I've had the kids. But there is a case for just sort of making sure you carve out some time, however busy your schedule is. I think there's always, even if it's just like 20 minutes, 15, 20, 30 minutes maybe, that you can just sneak in there and just, read a bit of a codex, or have slap a base coat down on something, or just stick a wash on something, see how it looks, glaze something. Just for a couple of minutes, just as a little investment in yourself. It doesn't need to be, daily. Could be, but doesn't need to be. Could just be like a little weekly thing. You might have a little, special day that's, you've got like a bit of an afternoon free or something. It's just like finding that time, and not feeling guilty about it as well. I feel is important, because I know people are like, oh, I've got all these things to do, and I've got, the expectations of people on me and whatever. And it's like, yeah, okay, but you also do need to be a person in your own right, in order to be a person for other people.
Yeah.
So you need to, I think, invest in yourself. And if that investment includes, trying to paint some eyeballs on a really tiny little dude.
Again and again and again.
Or painting rocks to look like rocks. Painting.
Well, this is it. The selfish aspect, self-care and self-love is not selfish.
No, exactly. No one kind of thought badly of, in yesteryear of like, a dad going out to his shed and like tinkering and doing something, and what's he doing? Who knows? But he's like tinkering in there. I don't think people really have a issue with that, and there's certainly no one's like, boo, they can't also do that and like exist as a person. I certainly think sort of treating yourself and sort of investing a little bit of time into yourself is certainly worth it in the long run.
Yeah, but you've got to be careful not to completely block out life and suddenly...
No, I mean, that's the same with everything, isn't it? It's the same with like video games, stuff like that, where you do that thing of like, I'm just gonna play a little bit of whatever before bed, and then suddenly it's 3 a.m. and you're like, oh god,
yeah, it happened again.
Did it again.
Yeah.
I absolutely did that when Skyrim first came out. I was terrible for a few weeks. I was just like, yeah, I'll be fine. I'm just gonna like, what's this? Oh, I'm gonna go up this path and see. And then I was like, oh no, the sun's coming up. How did that happen?
It's not an addiction. I can stop any time I want.
Yeah, no, I couldn't. I absolutely couldn't.
Yeah,
it was an addiction.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but balance, and like it should be part of your life, not 100% of your life. But even though you do it for a job, right? You've still got other aspects of your life. You socialize with family and friends. You cook meals, and you're very good at cooking meals, I would say, as well.
Thanks, bud. Cooking is probably my number one passion, probably. Love cooking.
Yeah. Meat.
No, not just meat. I've like cooked for vegetarians for 20 years, man. I'm like so good at cooking for vegetarians. I feel more confident cooking a good vegetarian meal than like, I feel like the pressure is more there if, you have someone over for steak or something. You're like, oh God.
You said vegetarians just don't bother. They're not.
Yeah, they just don't care.
As long as there's no meat in it, I'm totally cool.
Exactly.
Just put cheese on it. Everything is fine. Fantastic.
The secret is MSG.
It's that Maggie sauce, right? You shake that Maggie sauce on.
The essence of pure flavour.
Yes, flavour sauce. Fantastic. That has been incredibly insightful, Guy. Thanks for joining me on this conversation as we've been talking about hobbies, some of the things that we love about them. There are challenges with them as well, but the world is a massive place and the internet is your friend. So if you're interested in a hobby, have a look at some YouTube videos about it, read some of the lore. Some how-to plays are also good to watch. So yeah, it's out there.
Can you think of any particular ones? Maybe the one that you and I are in.
Maybe see that if you're interested in Warhammer 40,000. But then there are so many different hobbies out there.
Yes.
Any kind of board games. There's tons of miniature board games out there as well. I'm particularly loving quite a few, but ultimately trying to get other people to play them. You reach a kind of concentration point, don't you, where you can't really bring any new hobbies in, especially if you've got other hobbies already that you really love and you're varying your time between them. Right?
Something has to go to the wayside. Yeah,
it does.
Not necessarily sidelined forever. Just it's that kind of hot and cold aspect.
Yeah, put that on the shelf over there for a bit because I'm more interested in this.
Or rather, in the slow cooker. You know what I mean? It's not. Keep it edible. Just.
It's a very good analogy there, Guy. I love that.
Just not on the skillet,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guy, where can people find you if they want to find you?
YouTube, Midwinter Minis. Instagram, W Minis. TikTok, Midwinter Minis. At my house? No.
Let's not.
Yeah. Usually Colchester Zoo, most weekends.
Oh, God.
No, honestly though, yeah, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for having me. Thank you for having me as guest number 1.
No, this is it.
What an honour.
But do keep an eye out for any future episodes. We're going to be covering lots of different topics. We're going to be deep diving on some of the things that we've touched today. And also going to be bringing in lots of wonderful guests that are within the hobby that can give you their points of view. Everybody, thanks for listening. And just remember, keep it positive, my friends. See you next time.
Bye-bye.